Hey, welcome everyone to today's webinar. We're going to go ahead and wait about 60 seconds, let everyone get their audio situated and in here, and then we will get started. Okay, for the sake of time, we are going to go ahead and get started. Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar. My name is Megan Damon, and I am the Iowa SourceLink Program Coordinator at the University of Northern Iowa's John Papa John Entrepreneurial Center. Here, we work with the Iowa Economic Development Authority to bring the Iowa SourceLink platform to all business owners. Whether you're looking to start, grow, fund, or even exit your business, Iowa SourceLink is here to help you. We provide step-by-step guides, make helpful referrals to our nearly 400 partners, and house the Iowa Business License Information Center. We also have the pleasure of presenting these webinars in partnership with the Iowa Department of Revenue. In today's webinar, Nick Belke and Matt Bishop and Tara West will be providing an overview of Iowa's sales and use tax, including common taxable services and local sales options. Before we get into that, a few housekeeping items to cover. First, today's webinar is being recorded and will be available within the next week. You will receive a link to today's recording in the same email that you will receive as proof of your attendance. Second, the slides for today's webinar will be shared momentarily in the chat box by Connor Chanel. Connor and I will be sharing other resources and contact information if and when they're brought up during today's webinar in the chat box. Please enter any questions you may have in the Q&A box located in the bottom half of your screen. We do ask that you focus on asking general questions that could apply to everyone. If you have questions specific to your situation, we recommend that you talk to the department directly. We're going to hold off on answering the questions that come in until the very end. If you have a question, please use that Q&A box rather than raising your hand. We don't have the ability to have you come on the screen with audio and video if you're raising your hand. And with that, Nick, Matt, and Tara, I'll let you take it away.
Thanks, Megan. Appreciate your help with these webinars as always. My name is Matt Bishop. I am Policy Director for Sales and Excise Taxes. Like Megan mentioned, we've got Nick Belke and Terry West here from the Iowa Department of Revenue. We're going to present to you on Iowa sales and use tax basics. Start with our standard disclaimer. The gist of this is that nothing we say here is binding. If you do need some sort of binding guidance from us, you'll have to contact us directly and we can get you more help that way. This is a quick overview of what we're going to discuss today. We'll go into more detail on all these topics when we get to it in the presentation. We're going to start with an overview of the sales tax. Sales tax is imposed on the sales price of tangible personal property, specified digital products, and taxable services. I'll go into more detail on that in a minute. We've got the definition of sales price there. The important takeaway from that is sales price is the total amount of consideration for whatever the product is sold for. So if you're selling for cash, it's the total amount of that cash. If you're using, I don't know, foreign currency or you're using crypto, we're still going to compute the sales price on the total value of that. If you're using like a barter system, maybe trading, I don't know, food product for some sort of like a repair service, we would still compute the sales price based on the total value of all of that. Quick note on pennies. You may have heard that the United States is ending minting of pennies. Despite that, pennies remain in circulation and they're still legal tender. So you can still use pennies. They're just going to slowly dwindle in the money supply as the federal government stops minting those pennies. It there does raise a question of how to treat that sales price if a purchaser is paying in cash and maybe the retailer doesn't have any pennies to hand out as change for a transaction. For sales tax purposes, we do permit some rounding. The generally recognized way to do that is either round up or down to the nearest nickel. So if your sales price ends in a 1 or 2, you round it down to a 0, and if the sales price ends in a 3 or 4, you round that up to the nearest nickel to 5. So just keep that in mind if you're dealing with cash and you ever need to round because you don't have any pennies. Sales tax is owed if a sale is sourced to Iowa. By sourcing, we usually mean the location where the purchaser receives that item. So if you have a retail location in Iowa, your customer comes to that retail location to pick up the item, the sale would be sourced to that location. If you deliver an item to the customer's address, the sale is likely sourced to that customer's address. Sales tax is paid by the final consumer and it is collected by the retailer. If the retailer has nexus with Iowa, that retailer is responsible for collecting, reporting, and remitting that sales tax to the state of Iowa. I'll talk a little bit more about nexus here in a minute. So what is taxable? Like I said, all tangible personal property. Tangible personal property means something that is perceptible. Doesn't necessarily mean it has to be something you can touch. Like electricity is defined as tangible personal property, even though you can't actually touch that. So anything that's in any way perceptible by any sense, that's tangible personal property. Specified digital products are always taxable. Specified digital products are anything that's transferred electronically. So like anything you download online, like books, movies, games, all that's a specified digital product. And then enumerated services are also taxable. By that, I mean only those services that are described in law as taxable. We have a list of our common taxable services down there. You'll need to go into the Iowa Code to look up the full list of taxable services, or we've got a list on our website. Most repair services are going to be taxable. Lots of installation services, lawn care, landscaping. We've got a partial list there, the common ones, then the full list is either in the Iowa Code or on our website. Give you a quick overview of local option sales tax, or LOST as we call it. All retailers, marketplace facilitators are required to have an Iowa sales tax permit and must collect the state sales tax and applicable LOST on all taxable Iowa retail sales. So what that means is if you're required to collect sales tax, you're also required to collect the LOST, the local option sales tax, if you're in a LOST jurisdiction. The LOST is computed on the same items that are subject to sales tax. So if you got an item is exempt from sales tax, it's also exempt from LOST. If it's subject to sales tax, it's also subject to LOST. There's no special permit that's required. So if you've got a sales and use tax permit to collect sales tax, you can also collect the local option sales tax. Quick overview of use tax. The use tax is complementary to the sales tax. The use tax rate is the same as the sales tax rate, 6% tax on the use of tangible personal property, specified digital products, and services in Iowa. There are two situations where the use tax is due. When a retailer should have collected sales tax and did not for whatever reason, the purchaser will often owe use tax. And then there's very specialized products that are exempt from sales tax but are subject to use tax. Airplanes is probably the big example there. So just keep that in mind. In very specific situations, the retailer might be required to collect use tax. But otherwise, in most situations, if somebody's paying use tax, it's going to be on the purchaser to pay that use tax. Again, if anything is subject to sales tax, if anything is exempt from sales tax, it's likely also exempt from use tax. And like I said, the use tax is complementary to sales tax. So it's usually only due if sales tax was not paid on a purchase, then the use tax might come into play. If a purchaser is making taxable purchases on a regular basis, but they're not paying sales tax at the time they purchase those items, they should get a sales and use tax permit, and then they can pay their use tax through that permit when they file their sales tax returns. File those electronically through GovConnect Iowa. There'll be a specific line on the sales and use tax return that says taxable purchases. You enter those purchases there where you owe use tax, and you can pay your use tax right there. If somebody rarely makes taxable purchases without paying sales tax, they can also use our non-permit use tax return. That's available on our website, and then you can file that return online using GovConnect Iowa. Tax rate, compared to a lot of other states, Iowa is pretty straightforward on our tax rate. It's a statewide 6% sales tax rate. It's 6% on anything that's subject to the sales tax. So you don't have to worry about what the product is and whether the sales tax rate varies according to that. The sales tax is also subject to the 1% local option sales tax in local option jurisdictions. That 1% is applicable on most sales throughout the state. There are a couple of exceptions. You can use, we've got a tool there. We've got a link to where you can look up the exact rate in any jurisdiction, but in most places in Iowa, it's going to be the 6% statewide sales tax plus a 1% local option sales tax. If we get into the realm of use tax, then it's only a 6% use tax. There is no local option use tax. So if for whatever reason you need to pay a use tax, you only need to pay that 6%, and you don't need to worry about the loss if you're paying use tax. Some important rules: the tax cannot be absorbed or paid by the retailer. So the retailer can't say, hey, you pay this amount straight up and we'll cover any sales tax. That's against the law. You're not allowed to do that. Retailer can say that the sales tax is included in the sales price if that's clearly marked. So you can say like this item is $10, and that includes sales tax. That would be allowed, but the retailer can't explicitly or implicitly say that they're going to absorb that sales tax. I mentioned nexus. By nexus, we just mean that the retailer has some sort of presence in Iowa. If a retailer does have that nexus or presence in Iowa, they are required to collect and remit sales tax on their sales. There are two types of nexus: physical nexus and an economic nexus. Physical nexus is pretty straightforward, just means that you have some sort of physical presence in the state. The main ways that can happen is if a retailer has like a physical location. It can be temporary, it can be permanent, like a brick and mortar. But if you have a brick and mortar store in the state, you have a physical office, physical warehouse, any sort of business property in the state, you've got physical nexus in the state of Iowa. You're required to collect sales tax on your sales in the state of Iowa. If you're a service provider, maybe a contractor, maybe located in Omaha, just across the river from Iowa, but you come into Iowa to perform your contracting work within the state of Iowa, you have physical presence in Iowa. You're required to collect sales tax on your sales in the state of Iowa. And we've got a few other ways that you can establish physical nexus in the state of Iowa. By economic nexus, we mean that you have maybe you're located outside the state of Iowa. You have no physical nexus in the state of Iowa, but you make sales within the state of Iowa of at least $100,000 annually. If you do make that $100,000 worth of sales in the state of Iowa on an annual basis, you have nexus in the state of Iowa, and you're still required to collect sales tax on your sales in the state of Iowa. So when we say that $100,000 of gross revenue, that means all revenue from Iowa sales. So if you're a wholesaler, maybe you make a handful of retail sales in the state of Iowa, but your total sales within the state of Iowa are at least $100,000. Even though those wholesale sales are going to be exempt as a sale for resale, those few retail sales that you make within the state of Iowa are going to trigger your collecting obligation. You're going to be required to collect and remit sales tax on those limited retail sales in the state of Iowa. And I will note that other states have similar rules. So if you are an Iowa business and you do business in the state of Iowa, you're registered in the state of Iowa, collecting, remitting sales tax in the state of Iowa. Thank you for that. But keep in mind that if you do make sales in other states, you may have nexus in those other states, and you may be required to collect and remit sales tax in those other states. So can't really comment on their rules, but just keep that in mind if you do make sales in other states. Way to make your collecting and remitting obligations easier if you work in multiple states is through the streamlined sales and use tax agreement. It's a cooperative effort between most of the states that have sales taxes and the District of Columbia. Just tries to make the administration of those taxes easier if you're crossing state lines. Through the streamlined agreement, you can hire a certified service provider to administer most of your sales tax responsibilities. And I know that makes sales tax a lot easier for a lot of retailers. If you want to go through Streamline, you can register for all states through their registration system. Keep in mind, if you do that, you'll need to make any changes to your registration using that nationwide registration system. You wouldn't contact the states individually. If you want more information on the Streamline project, we've got the address right there. And now I will turn it over to Nick.
Thanks, Matt. My name is Nick Belkey. I'm the policy director for property tax, and I share sales tax responsibilities with Matt. Good to be here with you all this afternoon. Appreciate your time. I'm going to talk about permit requirements, return and payment requirements, and then we'll talk a little bit about exemptions here at the end. Tara is going to jump in and show us how to use GovConnect Iowa to register for a permit and file a return and make a payment, sort of in the middle of what I'm talking about too. So looking forward to that. With that said, jumping in, the legal requirements for sales tax permits are found in Iowa Code Section 423.36 and Iowa Administrative Code Chapter 201. You can find these laws on the legislature's website. That's legis.iowa.gov by navigating to the Iowa Laws and Rules tab. Recommend that when you're looking into sales tax issues, one, use our website as a resource. We have a lot of really good information there on the website, but also make sure that you know which statutes and rules apply to your particular situation. So I'll try to cite those as we go along here. So for permits, Matt mentioned Nexus. That's going to be the physical presence, remote sellers with $100,000 in gross revenue, or marketplace facilitators that make or facilitate $100,000 or more in Iowa sales. That's going to be your nexus that triggers the responsibility to register for a sales and use tax permit, and also as Matt mentioned, the responsibility to collect and remit Iowa sales tax and any applicable local option sales tax as well. A business does not need to hold an Iowa sales tax permit or file a return if the business does not make any taxable retail sales in Iowa, of course. But if those businesses begin making taxable sales in Iowa, then they must begin collecting and remitting sales tax and lost. They also must get a permit, need a permit to remit actually and make those payments. Permits do not need to be renewed, and there is no cost to obtain a permit. Only one permit is needed for both sales and use tax. This is a change from a few years ago. Taxpayers with one sales and one consumer use tax permit now only have one permit, and it's their existing sales tax permit, of course. Retailers with multiple Iowa locations need a permit for each of those locations, but an out-of-state seller with multiple locations only needs one permit for all locations. I mentioned our website guidance on this topic. There's a link to what we have on business registration there on the screen. There's a lot of good information there, so I'll just pause for a second if people want to write it down or take a screenshot. I know that this is being recorded as well, like Megan mentioned. So if you miss it and I move on, then you're not out of luck. I think it's pretty easy to find if you Google it too. For use tax permit requirements, retailers without a physical presence in Iowa and whose gross revenue from Iowa sales is below that $100,000 threshold can collect use tax from their customers and report it as sales subject to use tax on the sales and use tax return. This used to be referred to as the retailer's use tax, but again, now it's referred to as sales subject to use tax instead. Sales and use tax law changes from 2019. That's get to be a little bit ago now, but there were some really big changes in that year. Require many sellers who previously remitted to retailers use tax to obtain a sales tax permit instead. Applications for permits are available on GovConnect Iowa, which Tara is going to show you in a second. That's really our preferred way for folks to register for a permit. I think you'll find that it's relatively straightforward too. It's also going to be faster than the paper process that you can find through our website. But if you really want, you can go to our website and find permits there as well, and make an application through the process set forth on our website. It is unlawful under Iowa Code Section 423.36 to make a taxable sale without a permit. And once issued, a permit is effective until it's canceled by the retailer or revoked by the department. So we don't know that you're out of business until you tell us that you're out of business, I think is maybe the takeaway there. And also that the department has revocation authority in certain cases when folks are substantially delinquent on their tax responsibilities. Direct pay permits. So this is another permit type. It allows certain purchasers, users, and consumers of tangible personal property, TPP, specified digital products or taxable service to remit their sales and use tax, including any lost, directly to the department rather than to their suppliers. There are some threshold requirements before you're eligible for a direct pay permit. The big one is that you must have a tax liability of $8,000 of each month. And there we've put additional website guidance related to direct pay permits in the last bullet point there. Okay, with that, I'm going to stop sharing my screen and I'm going to let Tara take over, and she is going to show us how to register for a permit in GovConnect Iowa.
All right, so I want to start by saying any data that you see in here is fictitious. It's not based on real taxpayer information. So currently I've created a logon. I'm logged in onto GovConnect Iowa. Here we display what requirements are required to register for this, what permits are required that you can register for on GovConnect. We also display what you need to be able to successfully register. And as Nick had said, this is going to be the preferred way to submit that registration. It's going to be a lot faster. So I'm going to go ahead and click next. We then have identify your access type. So if you're a owner, officer, we have the full access. You're going to select that option, which is going to be the least restrictive level of access on GovConnect Iowa. We have the administrator access, which is going to be similar to full, but not quite. That's going to be intended for employees that are internal with the company, but not the owner. Then we have the other party access. That's going to be geared more towards our CPAs, tax preparers, third parties. So for the purposes of this webinar, I'm going to go ahead and do administrator and click next. We then have to identify what is our business type. So there are multiple different business types that are displayed in here. I'm going to go ahead and choose other. We do give a brief description on what that could be classified as. Then we have the NAICS code that just gives us a idea of what you're going to be doing inside the state of Iowa. So I'm going to just go ahead and choose one. And here you can see the codes generate. Again, you may not find what exactly it is that you're doing in the state of Iowa, but you can go ahead and pick the code that closely relates. So if you click on it, you get a brief description. So I'm going to go ahead and say yes and click next. We're then brought to the legal business name. I'm going to go ahead and just type in ABC Co. If you had a DBA or doing business as, you can go ahead and type that in as well. I'm not going to enter that. And I'm going to go ahead and click next. We then ask about a FEIN or a federal employer identification number. You have the yes, no option. If you say no, we do ask, have you applied for one? If you've not, that is going to be your first requirement, is starting with the IRS and applying for that. I'm going to go ahead and say, yes, I have a FEIN. And I'm going to go ahead and enter it. Then we ask about the headquarters address. This is going to be where a access approval code would be mailed in the event you requested access, or if your CPA does. And I'm going to go ahead and verify the address. We're then brought to registration contacts. These are just contacts that are optional in the event we had questions on something that was submitted to the department on this registration. Submitting names here does not authorize the individuals to act on behalf or receive confidential tax information. I'm going to leave it blank because it's not required. We're then brought to officer information. So this is going to be anybody who indirectly or directly has an interest of 10% or more in the company. I'm going to go ahead and click on add owner company information. These officer types can change based upon the type of entity. For example, if you're government, this is going to say government representative. All right, and I'm going to go ahead and fill out this information. Then we ask if they're a U.S. citizen. I'm going to go ahead and say yes. The authority for confidential tax information, this is going to be key. If you say no here, you will not be able to receive confidential tax information from the department when you are calling in. So on the phone, we will instruct you to submit third-party authorization. If you say yes here, it does add you as the representative certification form. So that lets us know you're able to act on behalf of the entity as well as receive confidential tax information. So I'm going to go ahead and verify my address. And then I'm going to add. As long as this pencil displays, that lets you know everything that's required has been supplied. Down here, we have the option to add authorized individuals. Maybe you're not an owner. Maybe you're an employee who wants to have the ability to call in. You can say yes here, and the next page will have you add additional individuals. I'm going to go ahead and say no for the purpose of the webinar. I'm going to go ahead and click next. And then because we're in the sales and use webinar, I'm going to go ahead and choose that for the tax type. But again, we have our most common permit types. Then we have them categorized for cigarette and tobacco, fuel and household hazardous, and then other not common permit types. So I'm going to go ahead and click next. We're asked a question in regards to sales and use filing options. So it asks if we have more sales in every month of the calendar year. If we say no, it'll ask if we sell in more than 4 months of a calendar year. Seasonal is 4 months or less that you're selling in. It does classify you as a monthly filer. And we do not interchange these months. So if you choose this and you need to change months, you do have to cancel and reapply. I'm going to go ahead and say, yes, I have sales in all 4 months, or in all months of the year, sorry. Then we're asked about the sales and use filing options. You do have to enter the projected amount of sales tax to be collected per year. This is an estimate. If you underestimate and it results in a lesser filing frequency, you can always request to change that. So I'm going to go ahead and just put 1100. And you can see over here, it does classify me as an annual filer. We then ask about physical presence in Iowa. If you say no here, it will not prompt you to add a location. I'm going to say yes because I'm located at the Hoover building. So whether you have temporary presence in Iowa, if you're coming foot in here, you want to make sure you are saying yes here. This physical presence portion does not pertain to you if you are stepping into the state. So if I click next, we have the option to add a sales and use mailing address. I'm going to go ahead and say no, but any billings notices that are related to that sales account, they would go here if you chose to provide one. Here, I'm prompted to enter my sales and use permit location. So again, we want to know what's the start date for collecting sales tax. Then we can add a location name. A lot of people have it be whatever they've chose for the DBA. Then we want to know about the activity at that location. Is it subject to hotel motel tax, which will add an additional schedule to the return? Are you renting automobiles, or do you need household hazardous? I'm going to go ahead and say no. And if you don't know what those are, we do have help hyperlinks displayed multiple times throughout GovConnect, so you can certainly click on those. We then ask about the location address. So is the headquarters the same as the proposed business address? I'm going to go ahead and say yes, but if it was not, you can say no and enter an address here. I'm going to go ahead and keep the NAICS code the same as what I inputted when I started this. So I'm going to go ahead and click on add, and you can see my ABC code has been added. If you need more than one sales location, you can add multiples here. I'm just going to leave it at that one. I'm going to go ahead and click next. One thing you'll notice with GovConnect Iowa, we do give you multiple opportunities to review the information that you've inputted prior to submitting. This ensures that we're getting accurate information. So you have the ownership type that I selected, my legal name, the last four of the FEIN, the headquarters, any permits and licenses that I've selected to apply for. Any owner information. If I chose to add an employee, there would be an authorized individual section as well. So this all looks good to me. I'm going to go ahead and click next. We're then brought to a confirmed submission. A lot of you, if you use GovConnect Iowa, you know we did an update over the weekend. You do have to click submit now. Type in that password and then click the verify. So here you can see I did get a confirmation for registering my new business. A permit letter is going to go out. And again, this is instantaneous. So you do get that number right away. So certainly go ahead and if you can register on GovConnect, I would go ahead and do that. And I'm going to go ahead and turn it back over to you, Nick.
Thanks, Sarah. That was great. I just want to point out too, just kind of a pitch for GovConnect versus that paper filing process. I mean, if you mail that paper permit application to us, then obviously you have the time that it takes for us to receive it and then process it in the mailing room. And then, Tara, can you tell us more about? I mean, I assume that it's not instantaneous that you get a permit number if we receive that by mail, but I don't know that for sure. Can you talk a little bit more about that before I jump back in?
Yeah, so if you do the paper form, which is the Iowa Business Registration, it's going to be Form 78-005. If that's sent via fax, we do say to allow 4 to 6 weeks. Again, it's going to be based upon what's coming into the department as well, so that could fluctuate. And know that if you are a monthly filer, you are required to electronically file on GovConnect Iowa unless you have a exception request. So I would say to stay ahead, make sure everything's in a line. I would go ahead and start on GovConnect anyway. You're gonna have to go there anyway.
Yep. Thank you very much. Okay, so we've got a permit now, and we're able to file returns and make payments in GovConnect Iowa now. So let's talk about what the legal requirements are there, and Tara is going to help us understand how to do that in GovConnect Iowa after I jump through a few slides here again. So there are two return filing frequencies, two main return filing frequencies. There's the seasonal filer option that Tara mentioned as well. Return filing cadence is covered by Iowa Code Section 423.31 and Iowa Administrative Code Chapter 202. So the first option here is monthly, and this is going to apply to taxpayers collecting $1,200 or more in sales or use tax per calendar year. Like Tara mentioned, these taxpayers are statutorily required to file returns and pay tax electronically each month. if we receive a paper return from a taxpayer who is required to file electronically, that return is treated as invalid. And what happens there is your liability gets estimated with penalty and interest for not making a valid return too. So make sure you're filing electronically if you are a monthly filer, and save yourself that hassle and headache. I will say too, you can find this information on our website. If you're unable to file electronically for some bona fide reason, you can request permission to file by paper. But again, GovConnect Iowa for most folks is going to be much easier. So the way that the monthly return works is it is due on the last day of the month following the month in which the tax was collected or accrued. One exception there is the streamlined sales tax permits that Matt mentioned earlier. For Model 1 sellers, those are due on the 20th day of the month. Annual taxpayers, I already mentioned that threshold. So if you're under that $1,200 per year threshold, you can file and pay by paper. And then finally, there's the seasonal filer option for businesses that make sales in 4 or fewer months per year, but are over the annual filer threshold. So this is something that we see sometimes for fairs and folks who sell at limited events that occur in the same months each year. And like Tara mentioned, if you exceed the 4 months, or if you're going to sell in a different 4-month cadence, then you've got to cancel and reapply if you have this kind of special return cadence. For most excise taxes, so you saw on Tara's screen, there's hotel, motel, automobile rental, and then there's also construction equipment too. Those are mostly remitted monthly, regardless of the tax amount collected. So that $1,200 threshold won't apply if you owe these kinds of excise taxes. For the water service excise tax, which we call wet, it's on its own permit and return. It can be monthly or annual, and it does use that $1,200 threshold. It's based on total wet sales and use tax collected per year. For payments, you make the payment with the return. Just make sure that you file and pay timely to avoid paying penalty and interest, like I mentioned earlier. If you have no sales or taxable purchases for a given month, don't just skip the return. Make sure that you file a return showing the department that you did not have those sales or taxable purchases. Monthly or semi-monthly deposits are not required any longer, but the ability to make deposits does exist in GovConnect Iowa via make a return payment. I'm going to turn it over to Tara and have her file a return and make a payment. Show you guys how to do that.
All right. So we went ahead and successfully registered for sales tax. Once that registration has been submitted, you're set up on GovConnect Iowa. You're back on this accounts tab. This is where that newly added permit is going to display. I will add a note that once you first submit that registration, regardless of whatever tax type it is, the periods are not displayed the same day. It does take a couple days to get those added, so do keep that in mind as well. So we're on the accounts tab. I'm going to go ahead and click on this file amend or view returns. The periods that you see displayed here are going to be based upon what I've utilized as a start date. Once you apply for sales tax, you are required to start filing returns, starting with that start date that we inputted. So here we can see the period ending. Again, this date is going to be the month that you are filing for, not the due date. We have a status column. It does tell you whether a return has been estimated, available, overdue, or if it's in a submitted status. We also have a due date column, so it's something to kind of keep in mind. I'm going to go ahead and click on this file now. So again, upper left-hand corner of GovConnect will always display that month that you are filing for. So do pay attention to that. When you first start that return, it does ask you 2 different options. Do you have tax to report, or you don't have tax to report? So if you had no sales at all for the month, you're going to go ahead and click on this. I do not have tax to report, and I want to file a 0 return. For the purpose of the webinar, I'm going to go ahead and say I do have tax to report, just so you guys can kind of see what that return looks like. We then ask you about additional schedules. So this would be in addition to the sales and use return. This would add another schedule on top of that. So if you sell prepaid wireless, a schedule will populate if you say yes. If you do hotel motel, that hotel motel schedule will populate. If you rent vehicles that are subject to the Iowa automobile rental tax, that will populate. Or if you sell construction equipment, that will populate as well. I'm going to go ahead and say none of the above, which will tell them all no. And I'm going to click next. Then we're brought to the sales information. So we want to know the gross sales and goods consumed for the month. So this is everything less the tax. We do not want you to include tax here. So I'm going to say for my gross sales, I had gross sales of $5,000. Goods consumed would be things you purchase with the intent to resell or to incorporate into your business. You decided to keep for yourself. We would tax you on that because you bought it tax exempt for resale. And again, if you aren't sure what they mean, there is that help hyperlink. You can click that. And it does tell you what they mean. So I'm going to go ahead and click next. We then ask you about exemptions. So this could be maybe you did a sale occurred outside of the state of Iowa. You would exempt that off on interstate commerce. Maybe you're a construction contractor and you had some new construction. You're going to go ahead and input that here. I'm going to leave my exemptions blank and I'm going to click next. We then ask about use tax information. So we know that the return is now 3 different tax returns into one. So any total taxable purchases you have, you would input them here. Sales subject to use tax, you would put that here. I don't have any of those, so I'm going to go ahead and say I don't have use tax to report and click next. Then we have sales subject to local option. So it tells me, hey, you've reported $5,000 in taxable sales. Are any of these subject to local option? I'm going to go ahead and say yes because I'm in Polk County. Then we ask about a local option sales tax upload. This is beneficial if maybe your sales occur in different counties in the state of Iowa. All mine are at one location, so I'm going to go ahead and say no, I don't want to use that template. And I'm going to click on add a county. So here I'm going to type in Polk County. And then I'm going to add my taxable sales here. And you can see once I click outside that box, it does calculate that additional 1% for me. And I'm going to click next. Here we have prior payments. So we kind of talked about how with sales and use tax, we do not require monthly deposits anymore. If you made a return payment prior to the due date, that's going to be reflected here on this tax return. It will tell you that our records indicate you've made prior payments of X amount. If it says 0 and you know that you didn't make a payment, I would leave it at 0 because if you do input a dollar amount here, it does not prompt you to make a payment if it's the full tax amount. So I'm going to leave this at 0 and click next. It asks if we paid all tax due on time. So I'm currently filing April. April was due June 1st. I'm going to go ahead and say no because I'm late. And again, here you have the dates. So based upon my taxable sales, my total tax is the $350. And then we're at a estimate for penalty and interest because I am after that due date. So you can either take what we've assessed, which again is that 10% and then 0.8% on the tax due, or you can self-assess. If it is incorrect, we will bill you back. So I'm going to go ahead and say no, and then click next. We're then brought to kind of overview. So we have the state 6% here on the top portion, the schedules. If you had hotel, motel, or automobile, those would appear here. I don't have that. And then a final balance. So the total tax, any prior payments, which I reported 0, and my total amount due. So the next page is going to prompt me to make a payment. So you have your payment options. You have the first option, which is a bank account payment. That is going to be the free way to pay. Because I am a monthly filer, I'm required to electronically pay, so I'm not even going to worry about the make a pay later. The other option is a credit card payment. That is a 2.5% fee. If you submit that via credit card, we aren't able to stop those payments. So just something to kind of keep in mind. I'm going to go ahead and choose the bank account. Notice we do add this that payments can take 3 to 5 business days to process. You may see penalty and interest pop up. Again, we're going to give you that postmark date. A lot of times you'll see a $0 pre-note verification pop up on your account. That's a good thing. We're just communicating with the bank, ensuring the information that you've inputted. If your bank does require the department's bank filter or company ID, we do display it multiple times in GovConnect Iowa, so do take note of that. I'm going to go ahead and click Next. And again, I'm going to go ahead and confirm my amount. And again, I'm going to populate a routing number because I'm in a testing environment. Any of the banking that you guys see here, it is fictitious. It's not a real account. If I wanted to save this banking information for future usage, I can go ahead and say yes. It'll stay for future references. And then we're at that confirm, and I'm going to go ahead and type in my password and submit that. So again, you have the request type and that confirmation number, and we're done. So I go ahead and click OK, and we can see that return's been submitted. So I'll turn it back over to you, Nick. Thanks.
Awesome. Thanks very much, Tara. Screen share. Okay. So we know it's taxable. We know about permits. We know about returns and payments. We're going to talk about exemptions and exemption certificates now. And I'm going to go a little fast since we don't have a ton of time left. Some common exemptions that we see at the department are listed here. So services performed on or connected with new construction, reconstruction, alteration, expansion, or remodeling of a building or structure, services performed from an employer, items purchased for resale, food and food ingredients for human consumption, packaging containers, prescription drugs, medical devices, delivery charges, and certain designated exempt entities. You can find more about the exemptions in Iowa Code Section 423.3. You can find more about designated exempt entities in Iowa Code Section 423.4. In our rules, look in Agency 701 chapters in the 200s. And then we do have some good information on our website too about exemptions if you think that some of the sales that you're involved with might be exempt. Purchases by a business, kind of a common misconception for use by that business, are not necessarily exempt. However, there are some common exempt purchases by businesses, like ag inputs, inputs that are directly and primarily used in processing by a manufacturer, certain inputs by food manufacturer, services used in processing items intended for retail sale, and then specified digital products used exclusively by a commercial enterprise. Same sort of deal with misconception. Purchases by nonprofit organizations are not necessarily exempt. Sales tax must be paid unless some other sales tax, unless you qualify for the exemption under the Iowa Code. Exempt nonprofits do include governments, including public schools, nonprofit educational institutions, nonprofit hospitals licensed under Chapter 135B, and certain other specified nonprofits in the code. Sales by nonprofits are exempt if the profits from the sale are used by or donated to a 501c3 nonprofit, if they're used for educational, religious, or charitable purposes, and if they do not come from games of skill or chance or raffles, bingo, etc. If you're going to a certain exemption, one way to do that can be through a refund claim, but another way is through an exemption certificate, which is proof that an exemption was properly claimed. Keep throwing code citations at you, so I'm going to throw a couple more at you. To learn more about exemption certificates, we've got more information on our website, but also check out Iowa Code sections 423.45 and 423.51, as well as Iowa Administrative Code Chapter 701, 209. These exemption certificates must be on file to support the exemption of a sale that would otherwise be taxable. There are certain rules around completing the certificate. The purchaser has to do that and provide it to the seller within 90 days of the sale. Then the seller must keep the complete certificate in their records. That's going to come up if there's an audit situation. Certificates can cover a single transaction, or they can remain valid until revoked or 12 months pass with no purchases between the same seller and purchaser. There are also exemption certificates provided by the streamlined organization that Matt mentioned and the Multi-State Tax Commission, and those are also accepted by the department. That's exemptions. I'm going to talk through some common filing issues that we see now. So we talked about annual filers. Just make sure that you're filing for the correct year as you complete that return. For example, the January 2027 return will be for sales made in 2026. We see people mix up those years sometimes. For a consolidated return, there's a required schedule that includes a permit for every location where the business operates, the amount by location, and then the amount if there is no location there. A return without this schedule is considered incomplete and invalid and won't be processed. Amending a return without canceling the payment can result in an overpayment. So if you jump in and realize that you made a mistake or need to make some change for some other reason, make sure that you think about the payment that you made with the return as well. This next one's kind of a big one. If you don't cancel your permits when you stop doing business, the department will estimate a liability and send a notice of assessment. So you get a bill. Make sure you stay on top of that if you decide that you don't want to do business in Iowa anymore for whatever reason. Make ACH payments with the correct permit number and tax period information to ensure proper application of the payment as well. So got to make sure you get that right. Couple additional reminders. If you're going to make a refund claim, generally speaking, the statute of limitations is 3 years. So make sure you stay on top of that. Tax permits used to need to be posted a very long time ago, but they have not needed to be posted for a very long time now. We do not have exempt numbers, and permits are not a license to purchase exempt. Few ways to stay connected to the department. When you get this slideshow, you can subscribe to Gov Delivery updates. We have a number of webinars that we do throughout the year. There's going to be a link to that in the slideshow as well. And then I'm going to let Tara talk about how to get a hold of her group for a second here too before we wrap up.
Do you want me to just go off your slides?
Yeah, please, if you would.
All right. So ways to stay connected. We have our phone number listed down there. It's going to be the 515-281-3114. That'll bring you into taxpayer services. You can also send an email to idr@iowa.gov. The best way that I prefer, either phone or send a message on GovConnect Iowa. That's going to be probably the fastest way to get a hold of us. And it stays kind of in the system. So if you're on GovConnect Iowa, you're connected to your account. You can find the send a message under the I want to tab, correspondence panel, and then send a message. We do respond in real time. It's 2 to 3 business days for that response time frame. And that information stays inside of GovConnect for your reference.
So I think I heard you say, Tara, that if I go to GovConnect and I send a message asking a question about my account and I get an answer, and then this is something that I would actually do. I forgot that I asked that question a year and a half, 2 years later. I could go back into my account and see the history of those messages and see that I had already asked that question and gotten a helpful answer. Is that right?
Correct.
Cool. You can subscribe to additional updates through our website as well. This is kind of toward the bottom of, gosh, it might be our homepage. I can't remember. Sorry about that, but it should be pretty easy to navigate to. But we've got a newsroom. We've got general tax information. We try to get law and policy updates out where we can, GCI updates, filing, and then we do have a team that puts together some pretty interesting economic, fiscal, and statistical information as well. With that said, I think we have 5 minutes left. I've not been keeping up with the chat, but we can make sure that we get any questions answered that we have answers to today. If we don't have answers to your questions today, we'll try to get you answers when we can. Other than that, it's been a pleasure to be with you all.
Right, you've been doing amazing with answering all the questions as we've been going, but are there any that would be good for everyone to hear the answer to at all?
I don't know if you guys want to look at the how long do we need to keep expired exemption certificates?
So what an exemption certificate will do is it'll, as a retailer, it'll protect you in the event of an audit. So as long as an audit is a possibility, we would recommend you keep those expired exemption certificates. Minimum or the standard statute of limitations for an audit is 3 years. So I guess we'd recommend you keep exemption certificates for minimum of 3 years. We can go beyond 3 years in limited circumstances. So, I mean, if you've got the storage space for them, we'd recommend that you keep those exemption certificates as long as practical, to be honest. Uh, Example of a nonprofit who would owe sales tax even though they're typically exempt. Not off the top of my head, as long as they're acting within legitimate purposes. You mentioned a school specifically. School is either going to be a government entity or there's a specific exemption for private nonprofit institutions. Those have pretty broad exemptions, so that they're anything they purchase is going to be exempt. I guess maybe the exception there is if you're acting outside of your legitimate purposes. Maybe you're engaging in some sort of fraud. Then you might have some sort of sales tax liability. But you've got bigger problems if you're engaging in fraud. I mean, just generally, a nonprofit could have just about any purpose. I mean, unless you're a specified nonprofit, you're going to owe sales tax on your purchases. So if you are setting up a nonprofit, make sure to check and make sure that you are one of those specified entities that can qualify for exempt purchases.
We do on the designated exempt entity side of things. This is probably going to be too in the weeds to be a super helpful answer to you, Dallas. But we do get some kind of complicated entities applying to us for designated exempt entity status, which allows them to purchase construction materials exempt. And sometimes those entities are, partially controlled by government, partially controlled by private entities, and it gets kind of complicated. There's some gray area there. So off the top of my head, that's kind of the best answer I can think of. So yeah.
I think given we only have 1 minute left, I'm going to go ahead and wrap us up. But for those of you who did not get your question answered, I will be sending all of the questions from today's webinar to the to Nick, Matt, and Tara so that they can take a look at your question and hopefully get back to you. One caveat though is if you asked it anonymously, we do not have your contact information for them to be able to follow up with you. So real quick, put that question in the chat, but don't answer it anonymously if you would like them to follow up with you. But with that, thank you to Nick, Mac, and Tara for sharing information regarding the overview of Iowa's sales tax and use tax with us today. As a reminder, this webinar was recorded and will be available to watch on our website or by searching for Iowa SourceLink on YouTube within the next week. As a reminder, Iowa SourceLink does not provide a continuing education certificate for your attendance here today. We do, however, send out an email to all those who participated within a few days after the webinar's conclusion that you can use as proof of your attendance. Our next Iowa Department of Revenue webinar will be on July 8th at noon Central Standard Time. This webinar will be an update about law changes related to the Iowa Department of Revenue enacted during the 2026 legislative session. Check out the registration links for more information. Visit iowasourcelink.com and navigate to our tax webinar page to sign up today. Until next time, have a great rest of your day and thank you everyone for joining us.